With the war that's taking place in Iran, so many people have forgot about the biggest story that has been literally crippling governments, massive corporations all around the world. But on this channel, we are not going to shut up about the importance of the Epstein files. In this clip, we are going to see a British journalist interview an American journalist by the name of Michael Tracy, who is an Jeffrey Epstein apologist, a Jeffrey Epstein defender. People actually refer to this individual as a PDF apologist, and we're going to see quite a heated exchange between the UK journalist as well as Michael Tracy himself. As usual, let's watch the clip in full and make sure you guys wait to the very end to hear my thoughts, my commentary, and my perspective, because you're going to want to hear it. Do me a favor, if you get value from this video in any way, shape, or form, hype up the video, but let's not waste any time. Let's get into it.
Around 95% of what people believe to be true about the Epstein story or scandal or matter or even mythology, as I've often called it, is either radically exaggerated or outright fictitious.
So you're not even just saying that this is a kind of moral panic whereby we are exaggerating it. You actually think a lot of what we assume is true is wrong.
Correct. And it not only has that bred a moral panic, it's fomented mass hysteria that's led to this epidemic of total irrationality and political turmoil and all kinds of negative downstream effects, both in the United States and Britain, to the degree that I'm aware of what's been unfolding there. I can give you one example that I happened just to look at tonight, if you like, that's Britain specific. So ITV just put out what they claim is some new photo that was uncovered featuring Peter Mandelson, Jeffrey Epstein, and Prince Andrew. I know it's the former Prince Andrew, but I'm insisting on continuing to call him Prince Andrew. Feel free to sue me under British libel laws if you'd like, and then I'll invoke the First Amendment and hopefully be rid of the suit, because he was stripped of the title on totally specious grounds, and I'm not somebody who...
Well, hang on a minute. You think the Prince Andrew is hard done by, do you?
I think there was no legitimate grounds to strip him of his title that relates to his supposed culpability in any kind of pedophilic sex scandal. No.
Well, he maintains his innocence. He denies any wrongdoing, but what we know for a fact is that he maintained his relationship with the world's most notorious paedophile for years after he should have cut off any relations, years after he was convicted. He has been proven to have lied about his relationship with Jeffrey Epstein, because many of the claims he made in that infamous interview with Emily Maitlis in 2019 have been proven to be untrue by files subsequently released in the Epstein files. And we know that he paid £12 million for a settlement to Virginia Giuffre, a woman he claims he never met. Now, that in and of itself is not necessarily a sign of any wrongdoing, and he denies any wrongdoing. But if I had never met anyone, I wouldn't pay them £12 million for a crime they accuse me of that I think I didn't do.
How about this? Has any British media reported on what I'm about to describe? Which is that if we're going to be so fixated on the so-called Epstein files, and I've been just as fixated as anybody, so I don't begrudge people for being interested. But it is interesting the selectivity with which certain materials from the Epstein files are emphasized across the media. So we get headline after headline of Peter Mandelson, who I understand is gay, but he's standing alongside some woman with her face arbitrarily blacked out, and that's supposed to connote something sexually sinister that he allegedly may or may not have done with this woman, or that's what the untrained eye gets the impression of. But here's a piece of information that I don't see reported anywhere, which is that there is a memo that was drafted by the prosecutors in the Southern District of New York in December of 2019 that was released on January 30th in this latest round of Epstein Files productions. And in it, they find, meaning the prosecutors and the FBI that they're working in tandem with, that Virginia Roberts Giuffre's signature claim that had dogged Prince Andrew for so many years, meaning the claim that she had been, quote, lent out or sexually trafficked as a child to all manner of prominent individuals, the FBI and DOJ could find no corroboration for that claim whatsoever and effectively discounted it. If you sort of read between the lines, they're almost shocked at how thoroughly non-credible this person is. And this is the chief accuser of Prince Andrew. So why isn't that ever foregrounded at all in any of the media coverage?
There are people, Michael, who have cast aspersions against the late Virginia Giuffre. But frankly, if
it's
you
not
ask...
me casting aspersion, it's the prosecutors who wanted to use her as a witness, if at all possible, in furtherance of their prosecution of Ghislaine Maxwell. But lo and behold, they discovered that she was so radically lacking in credibility that they essentially had to discard her.
Well, we know that she wasn't lying about meeting Prince Andrew, because we know from the Epstein files that have been released in recent weeks by the US Department of Justice that photo that Prince Andrew claimed was a fake was real. Ghislaine Maxwell said
Even if it was real, let's stipulate that it was real. Okay, that photo was purportedly taken in March of 2002 in Belgravia, London, when Virginia Roberts Giuffre would have been 17 years old. Okay, so if that is supposed to be the catalyst for Britain being engulfed in some sort of pedophilia crisis, it would have to be the case that England state sanctions pedophilic sex crimes to an unfathomable degree.
I don't think anyone is saying that. I mean, look, if that is your argument about moral panic, then I don't think anyone is saying that the UK on a state level is kind of sanctioning the sex trafficking of vulnerable young women and girls. I don't think anyone is saying that. I think what people are saying is there is a group of very rich, powerful men in the orbit of Jeffrey Epstein who either turned a blind eye to or may have been, and this is what we need to establish, complicit in his crimes. Let's just go back to basics on this, because you say that 95% of what people talk about is wrong. Can we agree on the basics? If I describe Jeffrey Epstein as the world's most notorious paedophile and sex trafficker, do you think that's a fair description?
No, that's totally histrionic nonsense. That's not grounded in the available evidence. Look, I know a lot of what I say here is going to strike you probably as shocking and bewildering, because the incuriosity of so much of the media to actually examine in an impartial way any of the underlying facts and evidence never ceases to amaze. So what we get is the proliferation of all this folklore that gets this hysterical tinge attached to it, and then people just assume things.
So you're saying Jeffrey Epstein wasn't a pedophile?
Well, I was just going to mention in my first answer to you, ITV says what basically you just did, which is that Jeffrey Epstein was a notorious, quote, convicted pedophile. I'm sorry, has ITV or have you ever gone to the original Florida prosecution of Jeffrey Epstein?
I didn't say convicted pedophile. I said he was a pedophile.
That's what ITV. I'm reading verbatim right now. This is from yesterday.
Convicted sex offender, and he was indicted for sex trafficking, and he died in prison.
I'm quoting exactly. This is ITV. This is the big new revelation from March 13th.
You're not on ITV.
Quote,
you're on LBC.
A photograph showing Andrew Mountbatten Windsor and Lord Peter Manderson wearing bathrobes alongside convicted pedophile Jeffrey Epstein has been uncovered by ITV News. So now, explain to me,
why don't journalists in Britain... hairs, though, Michael?
No, you're not. You're not. Because if you tell somebody that...
But do you doubt Jeffrey Epstein was a paedophile?
Yes. There's no evidence that Jeffrey Epstein ever exhibited sexual attraction or engaged in sexual activity with any prepubescent children. That's the clinical definition of pedophilia. Look at any of the medical literature. Look at any of the medical associations, whether it's in Britain or the United States. Look how it's defined. Don't take my word for it. Google it right now, please. That is the definition of pedophilia as a pathology. Now, it's always been defined, but it's been broadened out now to encompass people who are 17 years old who would have been above the legal age of consent in Britain and the majority of U.S. states. Now, any sexual activity involving that person is considered to be pedophilia, and that gets hysterically cited day in and day out to generate this totally unfounded mass pedophilia and child rape crisis that causes people to deactivate their critical faculties and go absolutely nutters.
Okay, you don't like the word paedophile. We will agree to disagree on that strongly.
It's not that I don't like it. It's just not accurate. I thought journalists were supposed to be precise.
Sex trafficker. Was he a sex trafficker?
Didn't George? Am I like misremembering like my readings of George Orwell? Not that I'm comparing.
But this is a bit like saying, Michael, with respect, this is a bit like saying because Jimmy Savile wasn't convicted of any crime, it's unfair to call him a paedophile. Is it fair to call Jimmy Savile a paedophile, even though he was never convicted of any crime?
I thought that George Orwell stressed to us the necessity of precision in language. Did he not? meaning the weight that language carries.
I don't think
and how journalists, if anybody,
any sane person thinks it is inaccurate to call Jeffrey Epstein, given everything that has come out in the Epstein files, given all the testimony we've had from women and girls and people who were in his orbit. I don't think any sane person objects to the use of the word paedophile in relation.
Do you simply not care that it's factually incorrect that Jeffrey Epstein was?
Well, I don't think it is factually incorrect. I mean, Michael,
have you read the June 30th, 2008 transcript of the plea hearing when he entered his 2 guilty pleas in Florida? I would imagine you probably haven't.
I'm sure he would deny being a paedophile. That's what paedophiles tend to do. That's what paedophiles tend to do.
He wasn't even charged with anything to that effect.
Michael, this is such a strange hill to die on. Why are you doing this?
It's not a hill to die on. Why is journalistic accuracy suddenly a strange hill to die on? Look, I know that Jeffrey Epstein is now some villainous combination in the public mind of Hitler and Satan, and and if you add a pedophilic element and everybody goes completely insane, but it's not a strange hill to die on when we're in the midst of a totally destructive, I would argue, mass hysteria and moral panic to rein in the overwrought perceptions of what actually took place and tether it to some semblance of reality. I don't think it's a hill to die on. That's a cliche that gets repeated on the internet constantly, and you just repeated it yourself. But to me, it's actually a worthwhile endeavor, because you know why? This doesn't just affect elites or Prince Andrew or anybody else. In the United States, right, as a function of this ridiculous mass hysteria, we've had schools across the United States cancel their school picture day because parents became convinced that the school photography company was somehow tied in with the Epstein files or implicated in some kind of child sex criminality. And they were convinced that their children's school photographs were going to be sent into some massive pedophile database. So that's this kind of stuff that's affecting ordinary people and fomenting this totally needless
Michael,
paranoia,
there are so
which also, by the way,
unanswered
abridges civil
questions.
liberties, which I guess people think is a useless hill to die on as well. I think actually the erosion of civil liberties is very baleful, and therefore, no, that's not a hill to die on. That's totally arbitrary and frivolous. That's what I'm going to die on. That's a hill I'm going to die on, whatever story happens to be contributing to the erosion of civil liberties. And if you don't agree, well, then we have a disagreement about the importance of civil liberties. I tend to hold them in pretty high esteem.
Just finally, is it too easy to dismiss this as a conspiracy theory? And, a lot of people are trying to investigate, trying to get to the bottom of whether this is broader than just Jeffrey Epstein, because these are the established facts. We know Jeffrey Epstein was accused of trafficking women and girls. We know Ghislaine Maxwell has been convicted of helping him in that. We know Jeffrey Epstein maintained friendships with some of the world's most powerful people. At the same time, what we don't know and what it's very hard to get answers to are other key questions. Where did he get his money from? Was his death really suicide? Why did it take so long for him to be caught? Aren't these all legitimate questions to investigate? And is it really fair to accuse those who investigate those questions of being engaged in a moral panic?
On its face, I don't accuse anyone of being engaged in a moral panic simply by virtue of their desire to investigate the questions that you just spelled out. Although I do have to note that in terms of the manner of his death, in terms of how he accumulated his wealth, in terms of all manner of things that he was accused of, there is almost like a tidal wave of information now currently available. We just got millions of files produced by the Department of Justice on top of the avalanche of civil litigation and criminal investigative materials that have been out for years prior to this, with journalistic investigation after journalistic investigation.
So you say nothing to see here, basically?
No, not nothing to see here. There's plenty to see here. There's plenty to see here in the sense that if people are interested, as I am, in the makings of a modern moral panic and mass hysteria, there's endless fodder here to be intrigued by, because, and you just gave a perfect example of it. You apparently don't care and think it's a weird hill to die on to simply be precise journalistically about our language and note that it's simply factually and evidentially untrue that Jeffrey Epstein was a convicted pedophile. He wasn't. I will send you the PDF transcript of his plea hearing in Florida, which will illuminate that for you. And maybe you can
clearly
be
you know
enlightened
more
as to what
about
the real
PDF
facts are.
files than you do about pedophiles.
Yeah, PDF files in terms of funny little quip, but if you want to do some firsthand research, which I guess is a novel concept for journalists these days, yeah, you do have to download a PDF file and read the court transcript, which will delineate what exactly Jeffrey Epstein pleaded guilty to in June of 2008, and you'll learn that it had nothing to do with anything that could be reasonably called pedophilia. That's just something that gets assumed post hoc and then told to the mass public And then we get this absurd situation where people who might have exchanged a chortling email with Jeffrey Epstein 10 or 12 years ago now have to do these groveling apologies. Or Noam Chomsky, the famed left-wing intellectual, and has to, in the midst of him being debilitated by a stroke at age 97, have his reputation totally destroyed because he knew and socialized with Jeffrey
legitimate
Epstein.
to question people who maintained a relationship after Jeffrey Epstein's conviction.
Yeah, question them all you want. And then when you're told in return that there is no underlying criminality involving sex offenses against children that they could reasonably be accused of, then that's the answer once you pose the question. It seems like people just want to pose these rhetorical, implicative, insinuating questions over and over, even though there's a wealth of material that would actually answer their questions to an extremely high degree of confidence, but they want to just perpetuate this alleged mystery and this intrigue. I don't even call it a conspiracy theory necessarily. I say that there's a default conspiracism or a conspiracist epistemology with which every sector of the media treats this thing, where if you can get some kind of data point or fragment of evidence that seems to potentially suggest something, that then fuels these overwrought histrionic theories about a pedophilic sex trafficking ring and blackmail operation. I'm sorry, there's just no credible evidence of a pedophilic sex trafficking operation or blackmail scheme, even though that's what people want to believe, because it gives order to the universe somehow for them. It implicates the British royal family and Donald Trump and Bill Clinton and everything else.
I appreciate you coming on.
Honestly, that is one of... Listen, I'm actually in two minds, and I always say this on this channel. I always say this, one of the things about me. I always see two things. Number one, why would LBC even platform a donut like that? That's the first thing. But on the other side, I say to myself, you know what? I'm actually glad that they platformed him, because people like me, like you, we need to understand it. We need to see what is out there, as well as who it is that people that are fighting on the behalf of the victims, whether that be a Representative Ro Khanna, whether that be Thomas Massey, any elected official who is fighting on behalf of the victims. These are the people that they're up against. So it's good for us to see. First and foremost, I am not a fan of people who are PDF apologists, just straight up. That's just my opinion. You know, I'm not a fan of those individuals. So people like him, what's her name, Lady Victoria, that has been on Piers Morgan's interview a couple of times. I'm not a fan of individuals like that. Now, I'm not going to come on here and say this individual is paid or is compromised in some way. Sorry, he is compromised 100%. You can see that just in his thinking and the way that he believes that things go and the way that things should go. But I'm not going to say he's a paid individual who is working on behalf of, you know, people that can be implicated within the Epstein files. But I wouldn't be surprised if that is something that is involved here, because it makes no sense. It is a very weird hill to die on when it comes to Jeffrey Epstein and the Epstein files. There's way too much evidence that is out there to suggest that it's just a complete hoax and it's a massive conspiracy theory. Way too much evidence that's out there. You know, and look, I know there's going to be a small portion of people that are out there that are going to be agreeing with what it is that he's saying. Of course there are going to be, but they're a minority for a reason, because just off of the little information that it is that we all know, without us going through the millions and millions of the Epstein files, we can know for ourselves that, you know what, Jeffrey Epstein was definitely not a good person, and he was involved in some absolutely ridiculous, crazy things. Now, the reality is this. We know, especially because I'm from the UK, Prince Andrew, his settlement was a good indicator that he most definitely done something untoward or something wrong. The very fact that when he sat down with a UK journalist and he completely lied is also another indication that it is that something happened and that he done something wrong. So to try and act like this makes no sense, and to try and act like the Epstein files are something that people don't need to focus on, don't need to pay attention to, it's absolutely ridiculous. It is, because there's 100% something here, and some of the activities that took place most definitely align with being called a PDF. So people can, he can try and do this all he wants to. Now, if we take a look at what's taking place in the broader scale, look at all the victims that are still out there that have come forward and said they are a survivor of Jeffrey Epstein. If it's just a massive conspiracy theory, well, why and how are all these people coming together and they're now speaking out against it? I'll just say this just to end it with this segment. I need to look more into it, but this individual, this Michael Tracy, he was removed from a Capitol Hill press conference specifically for Epstein victims because of his presence and the way that it is that he was conducting himself at the press conference. This is just an individual who's acting purely in bad faith and someone who was completely just gone off of the rails. And it speaks volumes that he literally had a complete meltdown when pressed and questioned on the Epstein files as well. Let me know your guys' thoughts in the comment section on this exchange. This is not the video I thought I'd be making today. I'm really shocked and surprised that I am making it, but hey ho, here we are. Let me know your guys' thoughts in the comment section. If you got value from the video and my thoughts and perspective, hype the video, give the video a thumbs up and hit the subscribe button. Appreciate you guys. I'll see you guys in the next one.